talk about what I consider the second stupidest thing that the show did in its later years, and that's saying a lot, we have to go back to the very first episode of the entire show. In that very first episode, Genesis, there is an eclipse. This eclipse is very much symbolic. It is very clearly there to symbolize new beginnings, as this is the moment where the people with powers either first discover that they have powers, or start to hone whatever ability it is that they have. All the people that we see actively looking at the eclipse have some sort of power. We see Nikki, Hero, and Peter all looking up at the eclipse as it happens. And there might be a few other people who end up looking up at the eclipse, I honestly don't remember though. And these characters all end up having a new beginning as they try to control whatever power they happen to have. Then comes Volume 3 and the creatively titled two-part episode, The Eclipse. Any and all symbolism is now completely thrown out the window as the eclipse now gives powers and also takes powers away while the eclipse itself is still happening. So, as long as the moon is between the sun and the earth, nobody has powers. Completely ignoring the far more plausible explanations given in the first two seasons that it's anomalies in the DNA that causes powers, this is a laughably stupid explanation for powers. I'm not going to try to pretend that I'm an expert in really any kind of science, and obviously this is a show about people with superpowers, but the first two seasons really did seem grounded a bit more in reality. The explanation given really made me think that this is something that could conceivably happen. Now we have magical eclipse mumbo-jumbo. And not only that, but the fact that the eclipse gives and takes away power is something that is obviously and provably untrue. And to prove this, I'm going to go through some of the characters in Season 1 to show you that they had their powers before the eclipse. I am specifically going to talk about all of the characters from this poster from Season 1, just to streamline things a bit because there are a lot of characters. Going from the left, first we have Peter Petrelli. Peter has empathic mimicry, which means that he can absorb other people's power. We know that he has a prophetic dream about Nathan's car accident, both because he tells Nathan about it, but also because we see it happen in the episode 6 months ago. That means he would have had to have the power of empathic mimicry so that he could take the power of prophetic dreaming from Angela sometime before that eclipse happened in Season 1. The next one is Claire. Claire pushes her hand through a glass cabinet in 6 months ago, really badly cutting up her hand. It heals very rapidly, much to her confusion. Also, in that very first episode of Season 1, she jumps off a insanely tall metal structure. She dislocates her shoulder, but is able to pop it back into place. She's also able to push her ribs back into her body, and she mentions that it's her 6th attempt. So it's very clear that she had rapid cellular regeneration before the eclipse. DL. We never see him use his power before the eclipse, but we do know that he escaped from prison at some point before that first episode. And he was only able to do this because he has the power of phasing, so he obviously had that before the eclipse. Micah. We don't see Micah use his power before the eclipse, unless you make the argument that when he took the computer apart in 6 months ago, that was him using his power, but there's no real proof of that. So Micah's the only one who maybe possibly could have gotten his power from the eclipse. He didn't, but there's no solid proof of that. Nathan. Now, the first time in the series that we see Nathan use his flight ability is when he flies up to catch Peter after the eclipse has happened. But we find out that that's not the first time that he flew. The first time he flew was in that car accident that he was in that we see happening in 6 months ago, so before the eclipse. Nikki. Nikki becomes Jessica and uses her super strength on their father in 6 months ago. Matt. Matt reads Genesis' thoughts in the episode 6 months ago. Isaac. Isaac had painted a number of paintings that had already come true by that first episode. Hero. While the first big demonstration of Hero's power, jumping forward in time to New York City, did happen after the eclipse, that's not the first time we see him use his power. We first see him use his power when he is able to make the clock in his office tick back 1 second. It's a small thing, but I think it's pretty clear that this was supposed to be the first use of his power, and it happened before the eclipse. And finally, although he's not actually in this particular poster, I'm also going to talk briefly about Sylar. We see Sylar use intuitive aptitude, his power, in 6 months ago to fix a watch, and also take his very first power from Brian Davis, telekinesis. So this means that he, and also Brian Davis, had powers before the eclipse. And as for the eclipse taking away power, while we never see anyone try to use their powers during the eclipse in Genesis, we do have an instance where someone uses their powers during an Eclipse. In the first episode of the second season, 4 months later, Hiro accidentally teleports back to feudal Japan. While there, an eclipse occurs. Hiro gets fired at by arrows, and he's able to stop time, stopping the arrows from hitting him, all while the eclipse is still going on. So there. Proof that this whole thing is bogus. You could make the argument, I suppose, that not every eclipse gives and takes away power, but at that point you're just making things more complicated than they need to be. And even if the writers of Heroes did try to use this as an excuse, to me it would just be proof that they realized that it was stupid, but didn't want to admit that they made a mistake. I want to say one last thing before officially wrapping this video up. Throughout this two-parter, Peter really tries to force the audience to believe that the eclipse is more important than just being symbolic. And he does this by saying that Nathan didn't fly until the eclipse. We, of course, know that this is untrue. And it would be bad enough if the show just forgot about it. I mean, it wouldn't be surprising, because it wouldn't be the first time that the writers of Heroes forgot what made the first season so good. However, they show the accident, as well as Nathan flying, in this very season. In episode 8 of Volume 3, entitled Villains, we see the car accident and Nathan's subsequent flying. Which means that they have proof that Nathan was flying before the eclipse, so all of this stuff that they're saying about the eclipse is complete and utter crap, but they're soldiering through with their stupidity anyway. And that is why I consider the eclipse one of the stupidest things that this show has ever done.